Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to create a checkpoint system for your level or game. Now, for those that don't know what a checkpoint system is, it's basically just a way to ensure that your players are not traversing back and forth through the level to the point where they rage quit or they don't know what they're doing anymore, they don't know what direction they're going, and are just lost in your level. This is also a good way to ensure that people are not saving and saving and saving as they go through their level, because no one likes to save repeatedly, and no player should have to save repeatedly just to return to a place in the level that they need to be. So for checkpoints, you're going to need a couple different things, but the first thing you need to do is figure out what type of checkpoint system you're going to need. So in this picture here, we have an example of two different types of level layouts. On the left, we have a level that is a very linear level, or a straight line, where the player starts in section 1, goes to section 2, and goes to section 3. And on the right, we have a very non-linear level design, where you have the option to go to level 4 and 5 as well. So again, the first thing you need to do is figure out what type of checkpoint system you are going to create. And these are just two examples. There could be numerous ways and numerous reasons to create a checkpoint system, but these are the two most basic ones. So in the first one, you'll see that the player starts in area 1. So if they die or teleport somewhere or leave that area for some reason and need to go back to level 1 or area 1, then you're always going to start the player in that area. However, once they get to 2, you're going to want to start the player at area 2 again, because they've already gone through 1. There's no reason for them to go through area 1 again, unless your game calls for that. At the same time, instead of just respawning the player at area 2, you could also give them a choice. Maybe a menu pops up and says, hey, congratulations, you're in area 2. Now you have the option of going back to 1 or playing area 2. Or you have the ability to refresh area 2 if you mess up, or resume playing area 2 if you mess up, or replay area 1 again. It's kind of like an in-game menu system between levels at that point. But in this linear area, if you get to area 2, then you now start at level 2 if you die, and then if you get to area 3, you start in area 3 again. Or since area 3 is the end of the game here, or the end of the level, maybe that is the boss area, the boss battle area. So if you die in area 3, you do have to go back, but only to area 2. So that's going to be a linear example. Now on the right, we have a non-linear example. So again, the player starts at area 1. If they die, they go back to 1. And then we have area 2. Well, if you get to area 2, you no longer have to play area 1 unless you choose to through the start menu or something. So you start at area 2 again. However, areas 4 and 5 are also unlocked for the player to go to. They can choose to go to 3, 4, or 5. So if we use the linear type of checkpoints, let's say the player starts at 2 and goes to 3. So if they die in area 3, they have to go back to 2. Okay? Or you could say, well, let's say the player goes from 2 to 4. Or it could be letters, A, B, C, and D in this example, because the numbers might be messing you up. Because the numbers make it sound like it's linear, but it's just an example here. So if we go from 2 to 4, you could say, okay, well, we wanted you as a designer to go to area 3 first. However, you went to 4 instead, so instead of taking you back to 2, we're going to keep you in 4. Kind of like a bonus. Or maybe since you're in 4 and you're not supposed to be there, you're totally going to die, and we're going to take you back to 2, or we're going to teleport you back to 3. So it all depends on what type of checkpoint system you want. If you want them to go linear, if you want it to be non-linear, if you want it to be non-linear but still have linear aspects based on one area before another, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But the main ones are going to be linear and non-linear. So let's take a look in Unity and see what we're going to do. So this checkpoint system is going to be in Unity 4.3, and we're using C#. So let's take a look at what we have here. You can see that we have two platforms. We have a green platform that we start on, and the blue one there is just where we're spawning. And then we have a blue platform with a green area that we would spawn in. Okay, these little small squares or cubes are basically just little triggers to get the location so that we know where the player is going to spawn. You can call it a player start, you can call it whatever you want, but it's just a location where we want our player to start in section 1 and in section 2. And you can just imagine that this is a platformer to where we have to jump over these platforms. And you'll see down below we have this big yellow box. This big yellow box is going to be our death volume. As you can see right here, we are actually calling it a death volume. So what happens is whenever you're playing a game, the player's more than likely going to die or find some type of negative aspect that lowers their health or teleports them back to somewhere in the level, whatever it may be. So currently we are walking around in section 1. You can see we were spawned in the blue area. We're walking around section 1 and then we're going to die. When we die, it spawns us back at section 1. Okay? So then we come over to section 2, and when we get to section 2, if we die, it goes back to section 2. We are now on that platform again. Okay? But look what happens. If I go one more time, right? Where am I at now? Okay? I'm back on platform 1. So our code isn't broken. We're doing this part here for a reason. So imagine if you are playing section 1, you make it to section 2, you die in section 2, and you get spawned again in section 2, but then you die again and you run out of lives. Well, you've got to start the level over. Now again, this is not pretty and polished. It doesn't have a menu system that tells you, click here to replay or whatever, but the idea of checkpoint systems are there. So let's take a look at what we have. Let me stop the level here. Alright, so in this, we have our player, which is off to the side. So when we start the game, we're just going to spawn him wherever we need to spawn him. We have our death volume, so whenever we touch it, we die and get respawned. We've got the 2 platforms here that just say cubes. That's nothing special. That would just be your level design. And then we have something that we've named Player Start 1 and Player Start 2. It's just these cubes. There's nothing special about them. They're just cubes. But on the box collider in the inspector, we've set them to be triggers, is trigger. So I could actually turn off the mesh renderer for both of these so that we don't see them, because we don't need to see them inside the level. All we need is our level design. We don't need the triggers. But for this example, we're going to keep those on just so we know what's going on. Again, these are just cubes. We just went up to game object, create other cube, and put them where we wanted the player to spawn. Okay? And again, the mesh renderer we would turn off, but we would make the box collider a trigger so that when we touch it, it updates, and when we need to, we can spawn them there. So again, how do you know when the player is in section 2? Well, it's pretty simple. You would design the level in a way that when the player touches something in the level, you know, oh, I need this to be recorded. And usually it's the player going through 2 trees or, 2 poles that are standing up, or maybe in something like Super Mario there's a flag, whatever it may be, to actually record the data and say, okay, the player reached this point, therefore save this as a starting point. So let's take a look. In the code, what do we have? And there's a lot of different code going on that we don't really need here, so I'm just going to delete it real quick and clean it up some. Alright, so the first thing we did is we're going to create variables. The variables are going to be for the player and for the 2 player starts that we created. So the reason we need the variable for the player is so that we can take the player in the level and move him to the appropriate locations based on where he's at. We also need the 2 variables here for the player starts, the 2 trigger spots, because we need to be able to get their XYZ location, and we need to be able to move the player to those locations. So for the player, I'm just saying, okay, he's a game object. It's just some game object in my scene. It doesn't matter what it is at this point, because prior to the level starting, you can't really declare items in your scene. Unity just can't do that because it doesn't know what's in the scene until you start the scene. So right now it's just a generic game object that I've said player, because I know I'm going to go find the player. At the same time, I'm going to say game object player start location 1, player start location 2. I could have named it the same, player start 1 and 2, as I did in the hierarchy, but I chose to add location to help me understand what I'm doing. And it doesn't really matter if these are private or not, so I'm just going to delete those. Variables are automatically private to begin with. Okay, so we've got our variables. Okay, let's find what else we have. We also have player start location number. So again, in our example, we had 3 sections. Section 1, section 2, and section 3 of the level. So this is just a variable that says this is section number 1. So we're going to start in this first spot here. Okay, this could be whatever number you want. You don't even really need to use numbers for something like this. It's just in this example we're using numbers. Okay, you could use booleans, true-false booleans. You could do all kinds of ways to get this to work. We're just going to use numbers for this. So when the level starts, what do we need to do? Again, we said we need to go find these variables, right? So when the level starts, that player variable, we already said it's a game object, right? So we're going to say, hey, player variable, we know that you're a game object. Go find something called player1. So you can see over here our game object is titled player1. We could get it by its tag, we can get it by its name, we can get it by many different ways. In this example, we're just finding it by its name. So then we're going to say, you two guys here, these player start locations, let's go find you two. So player start location 1, go find the game object titled player start 1. So here it is. So I'm connecting those objects, okay? I'm letting the game know what I want to do. So then what I'm saying is okay, so we know the player, and we know he has a transform, and we know he has a position. So player, transform, and position with an XYZ variable, right? So we know that position is a vector 3 in C# containing an X, a Y, and a Z location. So let's just update that. X, Y, Z location, okay? So we're going to be using all 3 because we are in 3D space in a 3D scene. So we want all 3 positions to be the same, equal to, the player start location 1 transform position, which is this guy. So we're saying player 1, move you over to where this blue guy is when the level starts, okay? You don't even really need the player start in there, the player 1. You could always pull him from your character controller assets. You could instantiate him into the level and then put him there. But just to make it easier, we just wanted to put him in the scene because he's going to be in the scene anyway. Okay, so we put him at player start number 1. And just to make sure, on player 1, if I close all these scripts here, you can see that we put the checkpoint script on the player. And we did that because the player is the one that's actually going to be colliding with the checkpoints. Okay, so if the player is what's navigating through the scene, hitting the checkpoints, we've just put the script on him. Alright, so since we're talking about collisions and stuff, we have an onTriggerEnter for the player. So when he collides with something other than himself, we're going to say, what are these other game objects that you're colliding with? Okay, we're going to say if that other object, that game object that you hit, has a name of death volume, well, what are we going to do? Ideally, we would set the player health down to 0. We'd play like a death animation of blood squirting out of his head, and we would have a camera animation flying around the level to show you how you died and replaying who shot you or whatever, or how the car wrecked. And we'd have a menu pop up that says refresh or resume or whatever. But in this case, we're not doing all that. We're just saying, okay, you player, what did you collide with? If the game object's name is death volume, then do the switch statement. So the switch statement says, okay, we have a variable here. What is this variable? Well, we know that that variable is number 1. So the switch statement says 1. Okay, case 1, case 2, and default. What do those mean? Well, a switch statement is basically a bunch of if statements all wrapped up in one. So what this is saying is the switch 1 says look for number 1. That's what it's saying. Look for the variable. switch between all of these if statements and find variable 1. So case 1 means if this variable is equal to 1, do this line of code and then break, or stop doing this. Okay, stop doing the whole function. So switch this variable, meaning if number 1, right? If case 2 is equal to 1, do this code and then stop the function. However, 2 does not equal 1, therefore this is not going to work. Okay? Then it says switch 1. So if case 1 doesn't work, case 2 doesn't work, well, here's a default function that you could just do because you want to. So we know that player start location is 1. So if case number 1 is true, which it is because the answer is 1, then we're going to set the player's position at the player start position, which we know is this blue one. However, once you get to area 2 and you hit something named death volume, so you get to area 2 and then you die, let's do it again. Switch 2. Is case 1 true? No, it's not, because 1 does not equal 2. Let's do the next one. Case 2. Does 2 equal 2? It does. So let's put the player position at start location number 2 this time, which is the green one. Okay, player start 2. So then if we die again, it's going to say, okay, well, you're in section 2 and you died, but now this variable has been raised. It's been going up because of this code. So that variable is now 3. So okay, if 3, does 1 equal 3? No, so don't do this. Does 2 equal 3? No, so don't do this. So default, none of the other answers work, so let's do this one. So let's put the player back at start location 1, which is the blue one, and then let's stop doing this function because we no longer need it. Okay, so that's where the you're in level 1 and you die, so you go back. You're in section 2, so you die, so you go back. You've lost all your lives, so you need to restart the level and go back to the beginning. Okay, so it's just one switch statement that lets you choose between which sections you need to go to, and it moves the player to it. So again, we have the player colliding with something. Well, let's look at the next one, the next if statement. And all of this is in one big collision function. So if the player, right, collides with something, and the name of that is player start 2, which is this green one, it's going to say take player start location number 1 and add 1 to it. Okay? So this here is the same as, let's lower this just a little bit. Is the same as this. Player start location number plus equals 1 is the same as player start location number equals player start location plus 1, right? So right now it says this variable is number 1, and when I touch this green box, it goes up 1 to 2, right? So every time I touch it, it's going to go up 1. Every time I touch that green box, right? So this could work in a linear format. So when you're in section 1 and you hit section 2, you're at 2. When you hit section 3, you're at 3. When you hit section 4, you're at 4. However, in a nonlinear one, you don't want to raise the number. You just want to set the number. So what I would do is I would say, if you touch player start 2, you are now equal to 2. If you go into section 5, the checkpoint is now set to number 5. When you go to section 6, the player start is now set to 6. And nonlinear, it's going to be like that, and just picking the specific number. Whereas in linear, you can add 1 to it and just go straight through. Or you could do either one you want, or do a combination of both. It all depends on what type of game you're making. But either way, this is how we set up checkpoint systems. So have fun.